successful books now. I want to say maybe 4. Don't quote me on that. I have read some of her other books too and enjoyed them. I will say this is not my favourite Charlotte McConaughey book, and there is a reason for that. My favourite of her books is the one that is based in Scotland, called Once There Were Wolves. And I don't have a physical copy of that one. I read it digitally. But because that one's based in Scotland, which is where I'm from, that one does tend to always fall into my heart as my favourite. But this one was also a good read. So, oh yeah, so she has written a book called Migrations too. Once There Were Wolves, that is my favourite Charlotte McConaughey book. And we have this beautiful cover. Charlotte's cover was designed by Donna Siniscali Noetzel, and I think it's really beautiful. I think she's a talented cover designer. I also want to give a shout out to the creators that help bring books to life. I think that's really important. Designers don't get enough praise, you guys. So, as I said, Charlotte's books always tend to have really interesting, in-depth character arcs, as well as a good driving plot behind everything. And this book is no different. So, in Wild Dark Shore, we are in a couple of different point of view characters. So we have Rowan, and Rowan is a woman who washes up on the shore of the island this book is based on, and she is lucky to survive. There is one family living on the island. The father is called, is it Damien? Let me check. Dominic. The father of the family is called Dominic Salt, and we follow Rowan, the lady who washes up, Dominic, the father of the kids on the island. There are 1 or 2 boys, I forget, and then a little girl, and they have lost their mother, and this woman washes up, and there's a lot of distrust, because they don't often have visitors there. It's a very, very remote place where they are keeping a seed bank. So you'll have probably heard of those. Like, if everything in the world was to be destroyed, there are seed banks where seeds are kept viable in very specific temperatures, and we would be able to grow food again from those seeds. And this little island that is the centre of the book has one of those seed banks, and it's in trouble. So the whole island is succumbing to rising water, rising tides brought on by environmental issues, and they are going to be forced to leave, and they can't take all of the seeds with them. So there are a lot of problems on the island, and what almost sees her or hears her. I forget. So he is quite complicated in that sense. And then his daughter, she is feral, but in the best way possible. She's a very lovable character. So she is an exceptional swimmer, and she kind of has different insights than other people would have. She is quite observant. Wait. You know what I'm trying to say. She has good observational skills. And one of the boys is a very talented musician. So each of our characters has some sort of special thing about them. And it says that Charlotte is a New York Times best-selling author, and I wouldn't be surprised if this book made the list, the New York Times bestseller list, although I'm not 100% sure. And it says here, at once a gripping mystery, an exquisitely written ode to the natural world, and a taut psychological thriller, Wild Dark Shore is a triumph, breathtaking. Let me see. I'll read you the little blurb that's in the front cover here. Dominic Salt and his 3 children are caretakers of Shearwater, a tiny island not far from Antarctica, home to the world's largest seed bank. Shearwater was once full of researchers, but with sea levels rising, the Salts are now its final inhabitants. Until, during the worst storm the island has ever seen, a woman mysteriously washes ashore. Isolation has taken its toll, and the Salts, as they nurse the woman ruined back to her strength, begin to feel like she might just be what they need. Rowan, long accustomed to protecting herself, starts to imagine a future where she could belong to someone again. But Rowan isn't telling the whole truth about why she set out for Shearwater. And when she discovers sabotaged radios and a freshly dug grave, she realizes Dominic is keeping his own secrets. As storms on Shearwater gather force, they all must decide if they can trust one another enough to protect the precious seeds in their care before it's too late, and if they can finally put the tragedies of the past behind them to create something new together. A novel of breathtaking twists, dizzying beauty, and ferocious love, Wild Dark Shore is about the impossible choices we make to protect the people we love, even as the world around us disappears. So I will say, I'm trying not to give any spoilers, but the Microsoft tentative, and it kind of all happens later on, really kind of gains momentum later on, but it felt a little odd. But at the same time, I'm sure on a remote island that you don't know if you're going to ever get off of, where the tides are rising and the storms are gaining strength, I'm sure we would all do things a little bit differently than we would in our daily lives. Now let's see if there is any other little notes about this. Surprisingly not. But I thought there may have been more reviews of it in the book, but this was probably one of the early editions that came out. I'm sure there's probably later ones that show it as being a New York Times bestseller and with more reviews. But I'll just read. The first chapter is very small. This first little introduction to Rowan, and I think that is a very interesting introduction to a book. So, I have hated my mother for most of my life, but it is her face I see as I drown. I mean, that is quite the hook of a sentence. The face I see when I wake from drowning is different. It is rough and wind-bitten and scratchy. It is what I'm looking at when the sudden arrival of pain overcomes me, and I know the image of him will forever be as one with this pain. Whenever I see his face, I will remember the burning sting of being dragged upon the rocks and flayed open, left raw. I will feel the bursting pressure in my chest. The sensation will be so vivid. It will be like it's happening all over again. His face, a return, a drowning. Now, if that is not an explosive start to a book, then my friends, I do not know what is. So that is Wild Dark Shores, and as I've mentioned before, she has written some other books. This is not a debut for Charlotte. And let me have a little drink here, 1 second. Also, if you've not seen these before, Brez. So this one's called Flow, and there's all different ones. Some of them have THC and stuff in them, but this one just has lion's mane, cacao, black cumin, and L-theanine. And it says you may feel calm and refreshed. Sensations of relief and mood elevation are often reported. So it's kind of like a little chill drink, and it tastes delightful. It's lemon elderflower social tonic is what it's called. So, as I was saying, this is not Charlotte McConaughey's first book, and I can't remember if it's Migrations or that's one of her earlier books, or Once There Were Wolves, but one of her books has been picked up by, I'm sure it's Benedict Cumberbatch's production company, and authors either. Sorry if you can hear my dog woo-wooing. A lot of authors kind of end up somewhere in the mid-list. In the mid-list. In the mid-list. Where they are selling enough books for publishers to continue working with them, but they're not quite getting to that top percentile where people are becoming more and more familiar with them, like your J.K. Rowling's and your Brandon Sandersons and Stephen King's. But I would love to see Charlotte